Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Look into the Mirror episode 4. And today we're going to be talking about Indigenous worldviews and the need to reconcile with those. For those of us who've been watching this series live or offline, we know that this series is about working on inner truth and reconciliation. And a lot of my work, for those of you who know me, has been around looking at systems thinking from an inside out perspective. The fact that when we are working with systemic change, we need to look at changing the inhabitants of the system for the system to change. If we only have a policy based or an outside in approach, it's not quite sustainable, because that's pretty much like treating the symptoms and not addressing the causes. And so while inner truth and reconciliation is hard work, it's a lot of emotional labor. The attempt through the series is to look at what are different spaces in which we need to reconcile. What are aspects of our lives that we've suppressed or not looked at or not dialogued about enough? And those have caused chasms in the systems that we live in. And in the past, we've spoken about caste, we've spoken about the partition and the trauma that it's left behind. We've spoken about racism in the Indian context in the last dialogue. And today we have Tongpang, who will be speaking to us from an Indigenous perspective. Tongpang is joining us from Dimapur in Nagaland, which is in the eastern part of India. He comes from an indigenous tribe himself. He's based in Chanki village in Nagaland. And he's done some interesting work in terms of working with organizations like Caritas and Missionaries of Charity, among others. And before we started off, we were having a conversation where he was talking about how he's all of 27 and perhaps there were better speakers for this topic. And the point is, firstly, of course, I've heard him speak and have heard him speak around the idea of Indigenous rights and Indigenous worldviews. And I do appreciate how rooted you are and grounded you are in that space, Tongpang. So that's one reason, of course. And secondly, another huge space that all of us as a world need to reconcile with is to not be ageist in our worldviews. Or age has nothing to do with life experiences, and a person that's younger might bring in just as much insights as an older person might. So that's the spirit with which I welcome you into this space. Thank you for joining us. And in terms of our live audience, we are a small triad today, and so we can keep the conversation flowing between us. And in case someone joins us in between, of course, we can involve them as well. Tongpang, well, of course, the meat of our conversation is going to be around Indigenous worldviews. I'd love for you to start with your COVID experience. I know you were stranded in Bangkok for a few months, and uh, perhaps start with how was that for you, and how did it change you, or what is it that you learned from the process?
Thank you for inviting me to your session and to your program. I'm very happy, Rukmini. And yes, I was basically stranded in Bangkok for about, let me say, 7 months. Yeah. And then I was there in Bangkok because I was volunteering for a group, INEP. The full form is International Network of Engaged Buddhists. They are a group of Buddhist community, Buddhist people who are engaging with different communities, who are engaging with different Buddhist philosophies, because it's not just one thing. It's like different communities have different aspects, from like Theravada to like Zen, and then like there are different sects of Buddhism, like from Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana. So it's an interfaith group which works to understand what's the deep meaning and what's the real meaning of being following the philosophy of Gautam Buddha. Okay, enough about the organization. The organization involved me for a program called SONS 2020, and then it's an English engaged program, an engaging English program for young activists or people who would like to learn English to use it in social awareness, or like to use it for self awakening. It's like it has a different dimension. It's a space for people to explore themselves. So I was there for 3 months, and then like after the 3 months, my flight was canceled suddenly, like abruptly, like it was canceled on 9th April. And then I was like, oh, where would I go? Where would I stay? And for a while, I was like thinking, well, my resources are limited. I don't have enough Thai baht or enough money. And then I'm not a political person who have connections in India or the embassy. This is very interesting point. And then the interesting point is like, I'm just a volunteer who's helping the program. I'm not a very top official in the NGO or community. But the community, the INEP engaged Buddhist community, they supported me. And then uh, one good friend and one good lady by the name of Oranut from Thailand. She runs an organization for the elderly people in Thailand, especially the urban elderly people. And then I have actually occupied her meeting hall. And then I used to sleep on the floor on the meeting hall. And then like I spent most of the time there with another Indian person, Rajkumar from Chhattisgarh, who himself is belonging from the Dalit community, and then is aspiring to be a researcher, a doctorate. So I had learned a lot about the Dalit community and then the issues uh, from a first-hand perspective from a fellow friend who I was staying there for 7 months. And not just that, in Bangkok, I just realized that Bangkok is like another home. I became like a global citizen because they were friends and they were strangers actually who became friends. There were strangers pouring in, coming in support, listening to me, um, trying to get support like donations for me, and then Raj also. Like it was like very during the COVID situation, they were trying to support someone who is not from their country. So that was very interesting. It was very interesting. It was, and then the Thai government at the same time. Presently, Thai government is going under issues and then a lot of protests. But the Thai government and the Thai people unanimously decided to like extend the visa extensions too, amnesty. And then like it was, it was such a relief for many people who are stranded and without flights. So that's my story. And then like I started volunteering for the NGO, the elderly people in the Thai community. And then I just realized like, wow, behind tall buildings and smiling people lies a deeper story. Like they may have tall buildings, they may have the best food, they may have best decoration, fashion, trending, rich people, rich cars, best cars, but still there existed a lot of poverty. And then the sad part was the elderly community in the urban regions, which I never had experienced before because I come from a community which is very close knitted. Like even though we are far, we have a custom of respecting elders, like, just like many other communities do. But we strongly follow that. And then with even the age matter, just like if you're older than me by just a split second, you become elder to me. So it's like structure is made. So I come from that kind of community, and then the Thai people also are from that community. But in urban Thailand, the situation was different, especially for the poor class, and then the elderly from the poor. It, the health systems are there in Thailand, but it doesn't also reach out to every elderly. those who are immobilized or those who are from poor sections, slums, and so and so. Then I had to go over there. I met around elderly from 8 communities, and then I had interacted with them, had fun with them, talking and listening to their issues, and then sharing jokes. And then I connected very well with them, and then I just realized, like, uh, this is if this is the development that we seek, and if this is the path we want to take, I think we must think over again. From my perspective to my people, I was thinking, because our people has not still transit. We are in a transition mode, especially from the indigenous side of community. We are in a transition mode to like adopting different philosophies, different culture, capitalism, business. So, so I was just wondering. I was just stunned for a while, like, wow. In some point, we are losing humanity, trading humanity for well-being of many other things, or like many other, yeah. So, so but I was there. I realized, I experienced these things, and then the support came in from many people, and then I was able to have good medical treatment, which was also funded by P. Chui. I would say Chui is one another elderly activist, and she supported my medical bills. And then like both of us, Raj and myself, could fly back to India with their support. And on top of that, yeah, we had wonderful people who were strangers and became part of a family. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, and that's such a brilliant exposure to the humanity that lies within all of us, right? If only we care enough to find it. It's unfortunate that it takes a pandemic for us to find it, but it's heartening to know that it exists. Coming to your indigenous roots, Tongpang, could you share a little more about where you come from, little more about your people, worldviews in general, for us to get an introduction to it?
Yeah, very. Thank you very much. Like earlier said, like there are many people who are more exposed to this, and then have intensive study or lived by the rules of the tradition. To be honest, I am a fourth or third generation Christian, and then a third generation or fourth generation from the new generation. I'm at 92, born in 92. And then I would just take back certain reasons and certain stages of indigenous communities point of view. I will just state it listed, okay? So the thing is like, we have a lot of history. The indigenous struggles and then issues and then worldview actually comes from, again, a lot of history too. For example, the northeastern region of India has a lot of indigenous communities. And then with that, it is a beauty, diversity. At the same time, there were a lot of conflicts too. And then for me, my parents were born in the generation during conflict. We have to understand this. During 1960s to 1980s or 70s, it was like total conflict, especially in places of Nagaland, northeastern region. And then before that also, there were like First World War, Second World War, which was disaster for everyone, of course. But again, indigenous people were also there. It's not that we are not humans. We were also part of the conflict. We were there. But it was the interest of the larger nations again. Again, the nationhood formation, larger interest, economy, and then and then again going before that, during 1980s, when the colonials were still ruling India, 1980s, so it's still no, I mean to say 1880s, that is still like the colonial period in India. Even that time, there were indigenous people, and then they interacted and were encountering the colonials that time too, maybe the Dutch or everywhere, but to specifically in Northeast India, I would say like the British. And then they also came up with some rules like, okay, these are the hill administered areas, and then these indigenous people will be left over for their issues, and then like we they will not involve in our issues, and we will not involve in their. A lot of treaties and pacts were made for the indigenous communities also, as per records of history. So I'm born in 1992, and then by that time, India had got independence, and then by that time, Naga communities also had a peace agreement with the government. And then again, in that time, in my generation, we have education systems, and then we had a rapid growth of what you call, uh, in a way, being assimilated into common nationalistic ideology. Uh, so these are all actually okay, I would say. So I am coming from a generation where I did not study anything about the Naga culture, and basically I would just there are a lot of stories from different angles. Everybody, because it's like a crystal, like we view from different angles, and then different colors you see from a prism also. Like, so nothing is wrong, but I will give you an insight of my life, a short journey. Like, I was born in Nongnak. Nongnak is a small farm area in Changi, and then it is part of the northwest, extreme northwest of Nagaland state, and then it's located in Mochong. And then, but I was actually pulled out from Nagaland and then moved down to Kolkata. I was in Kolkata, and not exactly in Kolkata. I was in Durgapur. It's a coal mining area, and then my dad was taken as an overseer or a worker there, coal miner, because there was lack of jobs in Nagaland, and that it was a conflict situation, and then people normally try to escape the conflict. So I was pulled out. I was born there in Nagaland, but I was pulled out at a young age. And then I was raised in Durgapur in an alien place, but I took it as a home. And then I grew as a toddler there. Then I moved to primary education. Then again, it was not the stop. I went to Andhra Pradesh, Hyderabad for my secondary education. I was there, posted there with my father and everyone. Yeah. But again, during Andhra Pradesh, I had to come with bitter reality of, like, again, family issues, and then like domestic violence among family members, like parents arguing, parents fighting. And then at that time I was quite surprised, stunned, like, what's going on? So this is where I'm coming from. But I'm not raised in a proper Naga tradition. I'm raised in an outside world, and then as a small child I'm studying what is being said in the book. Like, this is how to be an Indian. This is the citizen right. These are the communities, but nothing about the Nagaland, or nothing specific about Northeast India. Nothing specific about indigenous people or tribal communities. Also, uh, of course, there are a lot of instances or news about Naxals or the terrorist attacks in Nagaland, or for example, Khalistan, or for example, in South Indian, some communities creating problem, and we saw that in our textual, or those those ways, the manner where we see it as a child. And then I started thinking myself, interpreting, and then internalizing that, oh, why are my people so stupid? Why are they resisting? Why are they fighting? The army is supposed to be Indian, and then we are supposed to be Indian. So why are we even fighting? Why are the companies not allowed to be in our land? Why the people are not wanting to be rich? So because I was raised from a small time in different place with different perspective and different growth, I was totally, like, confused. Not from here, not from there. Because I was not totally again accepted again in the mainstream other part of India, because of my looks also, and then because of the way I think, or the way I eat, the way I like talk, the voice. So it was very difficult for me to adjust with even my people, because the news and all portrayed in that manner. So later I moved on to Shillong. That time I was like, I basically studied my high school there, graduated there, and then it was a big exposure for me. I started understanding the indigenous people, meeting some Khasi people, Garo people, Jaintia people. I started knowing many other northeastern people, because Shillong is a hub, educational hub for the northeastern people. Very easy to come there, and then many people learn there. It's a tourist state, so many northeastern people also travel there. Not only northeastern, all part of Indians, all part of the states come there and visit. I I get to mingle with people, and then I start understanding more. I was a very, I would say, a rebellious child, due to certain upbringing, and then just due to my temperament, I would say, my temperament and my history, I would say, like, I was little rebellious in like my thoughts. I was very good in maths, uh, but I really was lame at science and chemistry, and I didn't understand that, and I failed in science and then to commerce, which was part of my interests. And then I wanted to become a businessman or a corporate sector man, and then I opted for BBA management. And then like later when I wanted to go for my MBA, I shifted my total interest to MSW, social work, which was a big shift because I did not know anything about social work. But a part of me was saying I cannot be an MBA student, or I cannot work for a corporate after realizing, okay, because I started engaging with a lot of things and a lot of issues and a lot of work, and this demanded me to set aside these things and look into different perspective, like economics, away from family, and then like look into the capitalism growth. And it's nothing bad, but it has a different point of view, which I actually was not feeling comfortable. So these things took me a long way, and then like I started engaging with a lot of social work or field works, and then came to meet many rural communities, came to meet many urban communities, came to LGBTQ communities, um, came to women gender issues, and I was very exposed. I was exposed with even uh, some groups, marginalized groups, which were like affected generations for generations. I'm not just talking about the Northeast India. There are other communities in part of India, like they have been affected generations and generations, and then which has made them, like, which has dehumanized them. And then like, it's so interest. It's not. I would, that word interesting is not the right word actually. I would say like it's such saddening to say like presently many people acknowledge that and then wrote books on that, but not much has been taken step for bringing them. If you want assimilation, or if you want to make a country as a whole, like we must include and acknowledge every part of the history. We must acknowledge every community, and then bring them to the platform where they can also speak for themselves, not we speaking for them. So that's where my standing comes from. And then I started meeting my indigenous people as I worked in Caritas in Jammu Kashmir. I started understanding about the Dogra people from Jammu. It's very interesting, and then wonderful people. Dogra people are wonderful people, um, and then the Kashmiri people are the lovely, very hospitable people. The Pahari groups are wonderful. They have their own custom culture, and then they live like this. The Nagas, I would say, they live in the Pahari, means the mountain areas, the Pahari regions. Like, and then the Tibetan, I'm sorry, the Ladakhi people are also interesting because people misunderstand, and then like they would think that I'm a Ladakhi or lay people. And then I would be very proud and very happy. I would be like, no, I am from Nagaland actually, but thank you. And then like it was very interesting exposure for me. Then I went to Missionaries of Charity when I was working there also. I'm then so at one point of time I was like totally like, why are indigenous people? We have to stand only for the indigenous people. But when I worked for Missionaries of Charity, a part of me was touched, a common humanity part. Everyone died. May it be indigenous people, may it be people, anyone, every human dies. And the Missionaries of Charities are a wonderful group of people, wonderful group of sisters led by the ideology of Mother Teresa. Like, uh, I'm not promoting any religion or here, but the work they do, and then many other institutes like Vivekananda groups also are doing. There are many other groups, and then a lot of again non-religious groups are doing, carrying out, especially working with dying people, destitutes, orphans, and especially or differently abled. It's just a sight to see, because we meet and we touch with our common humanity. We see what's real. Our illusions are taken away when we befriend a person, and then we know that he or she won't be living long enough, or I won't be living long enough, and then understanding what is life and death, it just opens up a new perspective, new world. I was really amazed and then opened with the work that I was doing with the dying destitutes and the dying people out there, which opened more exposures, which opened my ideas to accepting a lot of my indigenous values also, the patience and culture, because I was tempered and I was growing from a different perspective as a child. Though I was an indigenous person, I was growing up and studying with a different temperament, different subject, nothing about indigenous or nothing. But and then I felt like an alien, a foreigner when I went to my village. But there was an uncle of mine. I would say uncle is a wrong word and then very offensive word for calling him, because uncle doesn't actually specify the relation, specify the traditional respect. I would call him Apo Zanba. Apo Zanba means like father's elder. Anyone who is elder than my father, Apo Zanba, especially from my clan. So he's my father's elder brother, and then he was wonderful person. Like, even though he knew that I don't know anything about the cultures and everything, he would softly explain me and then take time to stress on folklores and then like s- talk about the systems in Nagaland and then talk about how the village systems carry on, though it may be different and slow. So yeah, so this is where my interest lies in now presently, and then like I am very touched and then like moved with the practices of indigenous people, especially in my village. Like they still follow some traditional diplomatic uh, practices, which is like clearing the jungle or forest road paths, like connecting it with different villages, connecting it with the rivers, and then like community work in the farm, community work, and then like what do you call it, consensus consensus meeting, which we call it like um, uh, it's not the murung I'm talking about. It's about like mungtang. We call it mungtang. Like mungtang is a word which where all the village people, men especially, come together and then discuss and debate about the issues or the development projects or anything. And it sometimes takes a whole day to like just to clarify one or two points. Just like for example, like we want to make a playground. It will take almost a whole day to decide where the playground is, or like what, or it may take even 1 2 days, like because some groups will not agree that okay, this should not be here until the consensus is made. This is done, and I was wondering why it's such a waste of time doing this consensus thing. It's such a waste of time. Like you're wasting so much time on just building a playground or like just coming to a new policy. Just a new policy is being made. This is waste of time. I think some leaders should be elected and then done. That's how my modern perspective would say. But that was not it. Every person had a different respect. We respect every person for what their idea is, how they think, how they done, and then we want to take it collectively. So this kind of practices actually led to like the bonding of village, and then um, like the village surviving all the through ages without a connecting with other communities or other civilization, not becoming a kingdom or not becoming something. They survive sustainably because of the trust and then the faith between the people. It was not about how much I have. It was about like how do we share it, like how do we work together. So these are some things that really moved me in terms of my community practices. Thank you.
Wow, that raises a bunch of questions and leaves me fascinated, Thongpang. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm thinking of the various layers at which we need to reconcile with our origins and our indigenous roots. I mean, for a lot of us, we don't even know what our roots are because we're so far removed from it, right? And for those of us that have that possibility of connection, the systems we've designed around us seem to be so colonial in nature, even now that we we take away the privilege of a person being able to study or connect with their own roots. Like you said, you probably did not really read Naga history in your history textbooks, right? Leave alone the history of your clan. So yeah, that there's so much erasure of our origins that happens in a very systematic manner, and that there's such structural violence in that. And it's a challenging piece to reconcile with when the violence is so deep and so invisible that you cannot even sort of counter it very clearly. Um, there are several questions I'm sitting with. Of course, I also do want to weave in Alvin and Rohini into the conversation in a little while, but a couple of questions before that. I'm fascinated with the more I hear about indigenous worldviews from across the world, the more I'm impressed with how naturally, ecologically aligned those worldviews are, and which is very different for people that are urbanized and in a way mentally colonized and towards the capitalistic framework. So I think just yesterday I read something on Facebook, and I think I remember you had also shared it on your timeline about this Khasi person who had refused uranium
Yes,
mining at in her land, and she was being offered a ridiculous sum of money, which could have probably served a few generations after her, and
yes,
she refused, and the relationship with the land was as simple and clear that this is not what it's meant for, right? And I'd love to hear more from you around that in terms of what is the relationship with the planet that we live in that comes from your indigenous origins, where if you look at the capitalistic worldview around it, it's about treating land and water and everything else that we have as a resource, but that's not how it seems to work for you. So if you could talk a little more to it.
yes. I totally agree on that. That's she is Kong Spellity from Kong Spellity Lingdo. Yeah, and then she's a Kasi lady, Kasi woman. And then I'm proud that a woman had led like these things. And then I'm pretty sure we need this may be a good example to set for women leadership, including women in decision making and participation, which I totally incorporate and then support. Yeah, me saying that, if we go to our traditional histories and roots, um, okay, let me start like this. Just letting everyone know, every viewer know, especially Rukmini IRG, Apple, for you also, when you are speaking with indigenous people or talking about indigenous community, remember that we are of the same species. We are all Homo sapiens. Sometimes we tend to forget, especially when some people say indigenous people, and then they get pissed off, like as if like, oh, we are being highlighted so high, or we are sometimes we are highlighted so low. Who are they? Like, or sometimes some people get little envious or get upset, like, what's new on that? That those things were done all primitive, like. So I'm not glorifying when I say indigenous people. We are also human beings just like you were. And then everyone belonged to some indigenous group before they migrated, and then they started uh, coming to a different system or different perspective or different view. Um, I would suggest a movie. Watch The Matrix. The Matrix, I mean to say, it's an action movie. I would say it's not very close, but the philosophy in it is like you are in a system, in a robotic computer system, and then you function according to system without even knowing. Some people don't want to wake up from the system because they're happy with what they're living as, and some people are knowing that this is not the way to live, or we are all in different matrices. We are all in different systems. So indigenous system is also indigenous people are also humans, but they have a different thinking or different outlook towards the system. That's the only thing. And then indigenous people don't look. First thing is like don't look in very big aspects, in a sense like they only look at what they can control or what they can utilize or what they can work on. They don't go beyond a certain aspect like make an empire, or else Naga people by now would have an empire. Empire in the sense like, for example, they would not start living in villages, or they would be like the home kings also. Like we would be the Naga kings. Like it just I'm just making a sarcastic humor or like some kind of joke, but we have to understand that these people, indigenous people, uh, were not primitive. They also knew that these kingdoms existed, these dynasties existed, these nations existed, but they fled or they escaped or they didn't want to be part of like that system. It's just a person making a choice like I don't want to live in like this system. I want to live separately in a different system which is created by ourselves. And then indigenous people also have not the same basic story. When we say indigenous people, we sometimes commonly generalize all our indigenous people, all are like Tarzan, or for example, like all are like this or like that. No, many indigenous communities are very sophisticated. To be honest, in Naga community, we had guns. Some of the tribes can make guns, for example. How many of us can make guns? To be very honest, the, so guns. I'm not saying guns is a way to declare they are modern. But what I'm trying to prove is like not only indigenous communities or indigenous communities doesn't mean it's primitive. They know their what lifestyle and then they chose that lifestyle because they prefer it on top of the different lifestyle. Just like vegans right now. They chose to be vegans because they want a different lifestyle. Some vegetarians, some non-vegetarians. This is that kind of ideology. So when you come to indigenous people, and then uh, let me just say how are we connected to the nature and how are we connected to uh, the world. So we see, according to my village and then my community, my tribe, our community, previously before Christianity or before any other major religions came in to Nagaland or Nagaland's areas, we we had a tradition, we had a belief system. It might be very small, it's not even recognized, and then it's almost extinct right now. We had a belief system that the gods, if we still believed in God or supernatural thing, a being, a super being, and then like every element on earth or every being had a soul of God. For example, like God is the easiest word I can use right now, English word, because in our language it would be different. So every being or every element around us had a soul of God, essence we call it, essence of God. So if everything has an essence, so we have to respect everything. Everything has an essence, and this story is what I'm narrating actually from the folklores that I heard from my elders, and then from the books I've read on indigenous books by writers in Nagaland. So it also states again another thing. What brings us close is like our folklores and narratives. Like we regard women highly, and then it was like a story in a folklore that a woman gave birth to three beings. For example, it is interpreted as a story, and then you guys have to just follow me. And then the three beings were, one was a human walked in 2 foot and then 2 hands, same like you and me and all of us. Another one was a tiger, an animal, came out in the form of an animal. And then we represent tiger a lot, and especially in my tribe, and then almost all the Naga our tribe, Naga tribes. Like tiger is one of the magnificent beasts that we resemble as a brother and then relative. So in the story, it seems like the tiger is also given. We are born out of tigers, and then third is the spirit. Interestingly, a spirit also is our brother, fellow brother. So the so in these Naga folklores about a human, animal, and a spirit. So these stories also itself links us, telling us that I, a human, and then the other animal, we are born out of the same mother. For example, mother can be the earth and the planet. We are born out of that super being, and we are part, and we are brothers in this. The tiger represents not just the tiger, but even the animal kingdom. Just for example, where he and then like the spirit again, we are connecting. The third point is with the spirit again. The things which we don't see doesn't mean that it doesn't exist again. So it's that part. You cannot see an atom, but you cannot say like atom doesn't exist. A lot of atoms make this tompa, this handsome boy or a beautiful lady yourself, all of the audience. Like the the laptop which we are using is built out of atoms, but we cannot see the atoms. We cannot see the nucleus. So so I'm just putting some my reflections and the points that even indigenous stories had some value and then point. And then it was made in a such a way that people understood it easily. That okay, tiger and then the wild beings are my brothers and sisters. So we need to protect it. That's how the concept of sacred forests came in. Community forest preservation groups that came in. It's not the new term coming in from environmental activists or new government laws that saying like forest right. Actually, forest right laws in India and then the other parts of the world lack a lot of uh, good points actually, and then deprive indigenous peoples and people living in the forest of their rights because uh, we have the connection and then we protect it, but we are removed. We are being generalized. So in that story, these are some stories what I'm narrating. These are some points I'm narrating which are deep rooted in our Naga stories, Naga culture, which are not even highlighted in the books. Very sadly said, not even highlighted. And then another thing is the present activities. Let me talk about not just the past, but the present activities. Some of the activities which connect us to nature is like the seasonal and then listening of the birds or talking to the trees and birds. It is an extinct, almost extinct practice, which is practiced again. Maybe you will find it in the eastern part of Nagaland or the Myanmar part, controlling part of Nagaland. The people normally listen to the birds, insects, and the trees and read the stars and the astronomy. So we are not that backward. We knew how to read stars. We knew how to read the moon cycle, lunar cycle. We are not backward. Again, that's what I'm trying to bring in. The indigenous concepts are actually the choice of the people that they made that this way we want to live. So again, we had good connections with the stars and the nature and then trees, tree seasonings and then birds. And according to that, we celebrated our festivals. We celebrated harvested food, grew plants, went for hunting. And then even this is not very interesting part, but I would say like some rituals in, insisted in having the nature declare, uh, like for example, I know I'm not making sense right now, but please stick with me. So for example, um, Rukminiji, I will take you as an example. Both of us own land, or we have a compute regarding our land. We are oral narrations. To be honest, indigenous communities, most of us are oral narrative. W- We, we did write, they say, and some communities do write, but we basically use the oral narration as very honest. We practice that. That's a very interesting practice that we trust each other with our oral narratives, which is very hard to do now, especially with the corporate sector or the especially with the laws and policies. We cannot believe in the political system also. Like if they say something now and then the other day it might change. So it was not like that time. It was like we depended on each other's words and then we chose the words very carefully. So imagine that Rukmini Ji and I had a conflict on land, and then you guys, the audience or the people watching are the audience or villagers from different clans. Now the land I say is like claim mine. Rukmini Ji also claims hers. And how will the people are, we are from blood relations and then we are from same village. We don't want a war or conflict among the villagers. They used to do an interesting practice called eating the soil actually, because we believe that every essence of God or human, our spirit, is in everything. So we believe that earth can see. The soil on the ground which we walk can see us and feel us. So we eat that bit of soil saying a promise, an oath, like a ritualistic oath or something like, if I'm the one who lies, I would give away the life, and then let whatever nature decides be on me, like let it be death, sickness, or anything. And then they would just eat a bit of soil, and then with that belief, they would end the settlement. Somehow it would be a disputed land, but they would end, and then they believe that earlier days, the stories tell that the wrongdoer normally dies, or earth takes away the life, or something. That kind of belief was there. So earth was very much there. And then connection with the log drum. Log drum is an indigenous Naga traditional practice found almost in every tribe. And then not only Nagas, but many different indigenous communities is like, uh, we believe the log drum is alive. The thing is, like, we believe the log drum possesses a spirit, or the tree, because it's made out of a tree which is living, and then the log. And we believe that we are born out of earth, which is scientifically cannot be possibly proven that we come out from earth. For example, if I say, "Oh, who is your mother?" My mother is Earth. You will be like, "What? Earth is your mother's name, or you are saying typically you came out from Earth?" That would be the question. So, so there are narratives and stories that say like we came out from Earth, we came out from the river. So these are very interesting because, to be honest, in one way it can be metaphorical because like we survived from the riverside or lived in the riverside, and then we are part of the system. It's saying like we are part of the system, and then because when we say we are part of the earth, we start protecting that place. As indigenous people, we protect that place as a sacred place, protect that river as a sacred place. It was a means to again defend the river, the nature again closely, because it was a life force. We got free food from the river, we got free farming from the land, and then we were free out of control of the system. We were not in a system where we elected someone and then they took the decision and then we went to war or something. It was a system we were dependent on. Like, for example, Nagas don't have army actually. I mean to say, not the rebels and all present context. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the indigenous villagers. Uh, they don't have the capacity to feed an army. Every man and every woman took care of each other. For example, the Murung concept comes in. The Gotuls in the middle central part of India. The Murung concept were men dormitories and then women dormitories. Again, the women also had their dormitories. And then they learned to live with each other, cooperate with each other, think together, and believe and trust each other. So belief, trust, and then like the relationships were the most key factors for survival and then growth of a village. Those were the very good values that were there, which instantly is fading away. Yeah. Sorry, I took a lot of time, but thank you.
No, but that's again very valuable things for us to reflect on. And I'm thinking about how universal those values are if only we remember where we come from, what our origins are. Yeah, I'm thinking of one of my favorite movies is Dersu Uzala by Kurosawa. And it's fascinating how the title character Dersu Uzala talks about how everything is people, as he says, with that the earth is people and the tree is people and everything is people, and so that acknowledgement of life that exists in all the elements around us, and we happen to be one of those elements. We're not superior to any of those elements to lord over it, but we live with those elements. And it's yeah so when use the term indigenous, for me it's about people that have managed to remember who they are and where they come from. It's not so much a classification as a tribal or non-tribal, but people whose memories are still alive versus people whose memories aren't alive, right? And therefore indigenous populations seem to remember those origins, and uh, that there is therefore a natural sense of commitment to evolution, to spiritual growth, which somehow colonized or urbanized populations have been rather divorced from. And somehow our rather blinkered idea or notion of development in a way divorces us further, because what we do in the name of development is a very building a monoculture with a very narrow idea of progress, which takes us further and further away from our origins and our connection with the planet that we live on, and the fact that it is a living organism that we are a part of. So yeah, that there's lots to reflect on there, Tongpang. I want to bring
Yeah,
in
thank you.
Rohini and Alvin into the conversation here. If either of you have questions for Tongpang or want to share your views based on what you've heard so far, feel free to come in anytime now. You can unmute and talk.
It doesn't have to be question, but maybe you can have some thoughts on
Yeah,
it because, like, yeah,
reflections or anything you want to share or counter. Anyways, welcome.
No, the discussions have sort of been so like I guess as is usual in our sessions, like Rukmini knows. I guess it's just like so much to sort of take in that there, like it takes a little time to sort of
yeah,
bring my thoughts together. But I think yeah, like one thing that I realized like when you were speaking was I think maybe through our education system mainly there's this replacement culture or yeah, like wherein so like uh, as you grow your there's so many values or so many sort of family like things that come down through generations that you learn that you hear about, and then suddenly when you're in school or like especially through high school and middle school, everything is sort of replaced by science. You're taught to look at things from a scientific perspective, and it's the way it is taught is such that it's about seeing spirituality or um, like this indigenous knowledge, if I could call it that, as a as opposed to development and technology and science, other than like seeing it as something that goes hand in hand or as something which in fact informs the science and technology that we speak about today. So that was maybe like one reflection that I had. And then of course on a fun note, the emphasis on written communication, which is funny because there's so much emphasis on that. I guess like once you start working, that's probably one of the things that is like harped upon, that no, like keep everything in written. But why? I mean, it's paradoxical, right, that it's become difficult to trust what people say. It's so easy to go back on your words, and there's no emphasis on encouraging young people or helping people build that ability that you're mindful of your words, you speak what you can stay by. That is not encouraged. What's rather encouraged is like put everything on paper and make sure you have that
yes,
stamp. So yeah.
totally. Uh, if I may speak, like not a response to Rohini, but just like giving a little bit like I was also taken back, by surprise because all my like so 20 or 22 years I've been studying and educating in the modern education system. We talk about politics, we talk about constitution, we talk about rights, we talk about how to do an FIR, how to have case and then proof and everything. But when I come to my village and then like there are some cases being discussed and everything, of course there nowadays certain changes are done because in Nagaland, one thing to understand about indigenous communities, like indigenous communities run a parallel community. We have a parallel system. We have to know. One is the indigenous system, which I'm talking about, which is interfered. Actually, this is an issue point I am going in, but something which is we have to keep in mind also, which again the government systems placed, which interferes again the indigenous systems. Government system gives penalty, fine, jailing, which creates a hurt sentiment, which creates biasness again. I'm not saying the system is totally wrong. It can work in other societies and systems, especially in urban, and then many societies we have adjusted to this. But for my system, for example, we are like maybe 100 years after being connected with the world, to be honest. And then like just 50 years ago, we had touched, we were still living in a very traditional indigenous manner. What I'm saying, we did not invent computer, we did not invent car, we did not even see, and then suddenly we are driving car. I have laptop, I'm talking with, I have an earphone. Many in the remote villages still don't know that this is possible. So we indigenous people, not indigenous people, but many communities have jumped certain things, and then it's beyond the capacity also to understand it suddenly. At the same time, the world, how it is going on, it's very sometimes scary. uh, like uh, the internet may not be the safe place for people who have never explored it. Like for example, a child or young girl or young boy going through the internet, it's not a very safe space. It's like, and then you get molested or harassed, or you get lost because you are different. And especially for an indigenous person like me, imagine I was wearing my own traditional thing. First impression would be like look with a perspective of like an outsider. Oh, who is this guy? Like for example, and then if I say like I believe in the stars and moons, or like I don't have a major religion, now I'm nobody. For example, again, I'm marginalized because I don't belong to any major religion. I'm not just saying in India, Hindu or Christian. I'm not just saying that many major religions which are registered, but many are not registered. For example, like indigenous communities. So it's not even recognized. We are treated as strangers. We are not even treated as like uh, part of the like community, like part of the table. In the table, we are having discussion. Like four of us are right now here, and we recognize each other for what we are. But sometimes indigenous communities are so marginalized and so left out that they are not in the table also for discussion. So I, I, I would say, no, like we get dehumanized sometimes. We get dehumanized, and then that dehumanization actually causes hurt, and then it's a contagion. It goes on, like not only to the person, not only to the affected, but to the perpetrators also. Like it's like both ways. The hurt goes both ways. Like both ways becomes dehumanized, and then like the healing needs to like be like acknowledging, and then understanding and listening to one another. I totally believe in that. And then one very interesting fact, I would end with that fact. Like after the Mungthang, like special meetings or gatherings among my village people, it was very interesting because when I attended the first time, there was one man who stood up and said, before, this was about to end. Okay, the meeting was about to end. All discussions will come. Very heated debates were there. Always, you know how the meetings go on. Sometimes it's very heated. My point is right. After all the settlements, one man, an elderly, stands up and says something like, "Okay, the meeting is over now. As we walk out to the door, whatever issues and then hurts we have, we'll just leave it here, and then we will carry on with our life." So this is something he just says it. I didn't even note it down very seriously, but it was something kind of like a natural way of approach saying, because in this generation people don't have control over their emotions and everything, that whatever is discussed, okay, now after going out of this hall, let's see, now I'm not going to include you, not going to talk with you. Like that kind of hurt is passed on. So how to deal with these hurts also have to be understood, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm tying in what you just said, Thamkang, to Rohini's comment earlier around, when we lose oral traditions and we move to documentation and writing, that there's also a distinct shift in our approach to life, right? And how we end up holding grudges sometimes as a result. The whole idea of documentation creates a culture of holding and storing things which we really don't need to hold and store. We need to let go of, and that wisdom is so naturally present in cultures that happen to remember it. Unfortunately, most of us have forgotten that wisdom. And I'm also thinking of what Leonard Shane talks about in at the alphabet versus the goddess, around how the moment literacy was in a way invented and it got promoted, we moved into patriarchy in that process, right? Because
Yes,
the
yes, totally.
feminine works with flow, it works with data or information that's here and now and what's available. And so there is a natural sense of flow, and there's no sense of holding on to grudges or conflicts in that process when traditions are oral. But when traditions are written, the moment you document conflicts, the moment you document differences, uh, then our mindset shifts with it, and then we are trying to hold on to conflicts, and that then we create all kinds of isms, including nationalism and patriotism and all kinds of things like that. And then that creates deeper and deeper divides because we're trying to hold on to a memory of something that's really in the past. And it's what fascinates me is that something like that is so obvious, and yet we hold on to that idea of what literacy has imposed on us. Sometimes it feels like the cost of literacy is education. So yeah, that in a way brings me back to all the more for us as a collective to look at how do we reconcile with our indigenous roots. For those of us that have forgotten, how do we remember, and what is it that we can what is it that we can do to re-engage with our indigenous roots. um, of course, I don't expect a clear
Yeah.
answer here, but I'd love to hear your reflections on it if you have any.
Um, can you get back on the last line, uh,
Uh,
Rukmini? I missed you for a second.
in terms of how do we actively reconcile and re-engage with our indigenous roots?
Well, that's a very broad, big question, and then which I also, with my 27 years old experience, and then even if I have a 100-year-old experience, may not be able to sum up in very creative and very simple answer. Um, but it's a thought that we all need to think on, work on, and then for me, if you're asking my perspective directly on this, how I approach it, it would be like my action, my activity. I would go to my activity and action. Right now, I'm focused on a community. Of course, it is my village, not just, and then I'm not taking all the Naga concerns or all the Indian concerns or all the whole Asian concerns or all the world concerns at the same time because it will be very overwhelming. Being very logical here, very logical. I am taking the idea from my Naga ancestors and then my Naga beliefs, actually indigenous belief, I would say, that we must focus, start with small relations, relations between the family, relations between you and your land or your property. Like that's what actually Nagas did and believed. And then the thing of working together in a small activity or small project. For example, so Nagas did that. My communities did that for ages, and they survived, and then they prospered, and they're still existing here. Though a lot of challenges and multi-layered issues are here now, from corporates to everything to who want to develop, who want to take in, who want to ignore all the facts. These are other things, but what I'm saying is like we survived and we made it here. I'm here, for example, because of my ancestral practices, my indigenous preservation of the ideology of like we can work and sustain in a small area. The world is all ours, but we have to start working in our own small respective field of our interests. So I also start with that activity and interest. I focus on my village. I focus on like strengthening the relations, strengthening the community. I would say strengthening the community is the way ahead for any community, any part of the world, different world. Talking in the taking the top level organizations or any group of people, start with their own communities, strengthen that, and strengthening a community can leave a lot of miracles, a lot of path for other communities itself. It's very engaging, and then it would be healing in itself for many people as well as your own community and yourself. Like yeah, so Rukmaniji, it all goes back to again like to my people. I would say like it starts with self, like self and others. How we look into like I always talk about perspectives. I always talk about like the theory of like the friend, the stranger, and an enemy, which I always admire. For example, if I take one of you as a friend, I would be the best person for you, and then you would be the best person for me. If I took one of you as a stranger, no hurt feelings, but still, if you have an issue, I would say like, oh yeah, it happens, but I wouldn't be in that attention. Like, and if you are an enemy, even if you don't have problem, if you succeed, I would be very jealous. I would burn, and then I would even shut off this Zoom, or I would critique without any issue. See, the thing is, all comes within ourselves. How we look at things, how I look. Sometimes a stranger can become your friend, a stranger can become your enemy, and then it all depends not only on us but our actions also again, how we act, how we pass on the do we pass on the hurt, do we react to the hurt, or do we try to heal it, embrace it, and then like work it out. So I think there are a lot of things which we can look into, and the world is going too fast. Sometimes we are taking a lot of shortcuts. For example, uh, we are giving all our power to certain leaders, glorifying some heroes, glorifying some agendas. I'm not saying that's good, not bad. What I'm saying is it takes away some part of power from the citizens, some part of power from the people to voice up, speak, or against it also. It's very interesting. Like we say, let's take our nation for example. Not passing no hurt feelings right now. Okay, just take an example. We are a democratic country, and I love that about it. But if imagine 90% of the democratic country goes for 100% goes for voting, and but 90%, let's say 80% are just voting, just voting. 10% are just controlling and manipulating, such as political elites, and then on the 10% again, like 5% are like some uh, marginalized community, and then another 5% are like not even recognized communities, for example, or poorer sections. Let's say, and then the voting goes in favor of just say like the elites and everything. How can that be a democracy again, to be understood? Because if you say judging only by the votes and numbers and economics of people population, I think that's not fair to be if we discern on it and think on it critically. Sometimes in my place, this is a real example. In Northeast India, the population is very sparsely, especially my village, maybe around 10,000, and then we are, let's say 10,000 or less. It's quite not the village. I mean to say the whole population of junkie food everywhere. If you say village, it may be 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, according to census and present stats. So it's so less, and then they own a very big area. For the economic people and developers, they come to build a dam, for example, in that mountainous region. They see two big mountains. Wow, a dam, a river. Wow, it can be a beautiful river project. Lot of money, and then the vikas for the country, development for the country. They don't think about. They are going beyond. Okay, the dream is very big, and then it's very good. The development of country, electricity at the highest rate. We already have enough, but we want more higher so that we can sell it. So it's thinking of business plan again, and then everything is good. And then they say like the water will be saved for economic purpose of farming, everything beautiful. There will be employment for many people, beautiful. But imagine that small community raises voice in that storyline. How be they targeted by the majority country or the whole nation? Because it's the vikas of the nation, for example. Now you have put the big nationalism picture in it. What about the people who have been living there for ages, hundreds of years? What about the culture? What about their profile? What about their forests? What about their small farms? And then, do they really need that dam kind of water, so much water from dam to farm? And do they think they will get the job in the dam, like an engineer or anything from that small village or from that indigenous community? And do you think they will get an equal share or like equal compensation in a proper manner? Will and are they even discussed or talked? The big picture is like, are they even taken into consideration for discussion when the dam is starting, or are they just evacuated forcefully or any mean? I don't want to mention anything, but these are some sad realities people go through hurt. And then these kind of things, if we don't see and we don't understand, it can cause again greater issue, a lot of violence. It may not lead to extreme violence of extremism, but I would say it may be internal home violence. Just for example, say I'm a hurt boy, for example, then I become suicidal, or maybe I become depressed, or I become very radical, and I decided to kill more people, or I decided to hurt more people. I decide to hurt many women. What will happen? This will pass on. It will multiply. Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, sorry for taking so long, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, we must focus on how we are acting, how we are reacting. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. The way I'm hearing it is, the moment we attempt to reconnect and reconcile with our origins and with where we come from, there's also the reality of encountering the trauma that comes with it, because there's so much
Yes.
trauma that's come through colonization, nationalization, globalization, all kinds of processes that have been imposed on indigenous communities without them really having a voice or a choice around it. uh, has of course led to a lot of trauma, and a lot of that trauma is now intergenerational, because it's that there's just been no space to have processed that in the past. And the more it becomes intergenerational, the violence in it only
Yeah.
amplifies, right? So I think one of the things we need to be mindful of when we work with reconciliation is around staying open to the fact that yes, there is trauma, and we need to actively talk about it and work with it, rather than make it just an intellectual negotiation process of reconciliation. That doesn't quite work.
Yes. Action is pretty much involved. Our activity is basically involved. Our being there, present, is basically needed. And then sometimes we are so conditioned and institutionalized, I would say. I can point out another point, which is a big topic, but not going there. But we are sometimes institutionalized, and we are conditioned so much that, oh, okay, okay, yes. So sometimes the hurt people have to like actually are forced to like being conditioned and then say, okay, accept it. Like, okay, let it be. The major people want it, or like the country wants it, or like, for example, the world needs it. Okay, fine. And then like that that ignoring and denial itself, uh, these, these are some more things which can be put up. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we close, for those of us that are watching this later, Tongpang has named a couple of resources on the chat that you'll not be
Yeah.
able to see. So I want to name that. He recommends the works of Linda Smith, who's from New Zealand, and James C. Scott, the American anthropologist. And yeah, both of their works around indigenous communities are fascinating and make for a great read. So yeah, do look that up. Um, if we have a couple of minutes. If Rohini, Alvin, if any of you have questions, we can take that. Uh, or Tongpang, you can also think about any closing words that you might want to share with us.
Mhm. Yeah, I know there's a lot of things to take in. A lot of people, even myself, I'm exploring and decolonizing myself, and then like trying to explore more varieties and accept every culture and system. Sometimes we need to know for I would say like I would recommend another book on co-counseling by Harvey Jackins. Harvey Jackins. I forgot to type it. And then uh, I'm presently working with the Global Youth Alliance for Kindness because I feel there is a way where we can. Kindness is the one way and the best way to connect with different group and different people, and then overcome the hurts and pain. Just last words which I would like to end is like, and maybe you guys can also think on is like, we must all start to question and then see ourselves and then learn how to calm ourselves first, and then like learn how to interact with others, and then how we see them, just like what I said, friend, stranger, and enemy. How do we see them? And then and then the last thing is like understanding the society, understanding the system that we are in, and then like understanding other people's situation, and then like knowing that systems may be different, and then ideas can be different, ideas can clash, but that doesn't mean that we are not humans. We are all humans, and we share the same blue dot. Yeah.
That makes for a great underlining message, Thongpang. Thank you that we share that same blue dot, and therefore it's important to remember that connection as we work with each other and work with the planet going forward. Thank you so much, Thongpang, for being with us, and for those of us who are viewing this, I would urge you to, if possible, reconnect with your own origins and the wisdom that comes from there. If that's not possible, reconnect with Indigenous communities around you where the wisdom is still alive, and work with what that can teach us here and now. So thank you so much for being with us and viewing this, and happy reconciling.